soon as we can. Please do add your questions to the comments. Mel and I will do our best to answer them either as we go or towards the end, depending on how things go today. So trust is something that we rely on more often than we consciously realize. Most of us trust our family and our close friends without much thought, and we usually trust our neighbours. We trust books, or at least we start from the assumption that what's written is authoritative. We tend to trust instructions in a recipe or a YouTube video showing us how to fix something because we expect a certain level of care or competence behind it. At the same time, we're much more cautious about other things. We don't always trust what we see on social media, very wisely. We don't automatically trust the news anymore. We might trust Google reviews more than a salesperson, but even then, our brains are busily subconsciously scanning for patterns and signals. And then there are the moments that make us pause altogether. An unexpected phone call from the bank, or at least claiming to be, an email that says it's from the tax department and we're due a refund. Yeah, right. A LinkedIn connection request followed by a pitch. Those endless SEO emails promising we'll be on the first page of Google. All of those situations force us to make quick trust decisions, often without realizing we're even doing it. And what's interesting is that trust isn't just one thing. It isn't binary. It isn't on or off. It's contextual. We trust different sources differently. We weigh intent, familiarity, consistency, and credibility, sometimes subconsciously. And then we decide how much attention, belief, or action something deserves. This doesn't stop when we step into work. In fact, it becomes more consequential once we do. In a business environment, trust affects how decisions are made, how quickly work moves forward, and how much friction exists between people. It shapes who gets listened to, whose judgment is relied on, and whose input is quietly discounted. For leaders, trust operates in two directions. There's the trust others place in them, in their judgment, consistency, and intent. But there's also the trust leaders place in their teams, who they trust to decide, to act, to speak up, and to take responsibility. When leaders don't trust their teams, control increases, pace slows, and confidence erodes. When leaders do trust their teams, people step up. Ownership grows and trust becomes something that compounds rather than drains. Now, this is a shift that Stephen Covey describes as moving from command and control to trust and inspire. And it's increasingly relevant in today's complex, fast-moving AI environments. And right now, trust is under more pressure than we really might like to admit. The volume of information has just exploded. Content is faster, more polished, and more confident than ever. AI has made it easier to sound convincing, and even that's when something's wrong. As a result, many of the shortcuts we used to rely on to assess trust no longer hold. That brings us to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a trust environment. People decide who to follow, who to listen to, who to recommend, and who to work with based on signals they observe over time. Do we trust what someone says on their profile? Do we trust the consistency between their words and their actions or behavior? Do we trust their judgment, what they share, what they amplify, and what they stay silent on? These are the same trust questions leaders face inside their organizations, just expressed in a public, professional space. And that's what today's conversation is about. Not trust as a vague value and not rejecting AI, but understanding how trust is built, tested, and sometimes eroded, and what it looks like to lead with trust in a world where confidence is easy, but credibility is not. So, with all this in mind, I'd like to welcome Melanie Richards, Mel, to our Linkability Insights live stream today. Hi, Mel. Thank you so very much for joining us. You are in New York, are you not?
Yes, I am in frigid New York, although Leanna in the comments is letting us know it's a little bit cooler where she is. It's 0 degrees there. And friends in Toronto have 5 feet of snow. So we are delighted to be with you to warm up with your linkability insights. We will warm up and spread those rays and sunshine as if we're sitting on a seat in your amazing, beautiful garden.
Well, that would be lovely. First of all, let's start by hearing a bit about you, Mel. Now, I know you reasonably well because you're a member of our Linkability community, but other people may not be familiar with who you are. And because you're a certified trust expert, I want you to tell us who you are and what you do, who you serve people, please. Who you serve.
I started out in gifts and incentives, and now I am a hybrid event conversion strategist. That means that at live and virtual events, I love inspiring clients to create conversations, collaborations, connections, and attract ideal future clients or donors, and to express gratitude whenever they can. And one of the ways that we do that is by showing up in with our lenses, just like today. And just like Lanier's inviting me after, I've been on this platform almost 19 years. So it's really an interesting conversation. And I'm delighted to be a member of Lanier's community and to pop in and to chat with you more about trust. I am certified to work with trusted leaders. I'm certified to work with trust styles. There are 6. Those certifications are from amazing Yvette Bethel of Organizational Soul, the IFB network. And I am working hard on Advanced Trust Facilitator certification. Although our universe is sending a lot of examples before I complete that report. But delighted to join you today. Hey, as Meryl would say, I'm the daughter of a scholar, so the teacher's kid. The clues and the homework keeps coming.
Oh, of course it does. And don't the life lessons keep coming as well, Mel? I certainly find that if you don't listen the first time round, then it comes back again until you do. But let's start by asking you about when people talk about trust, they often mean very different things. It's different things to different people, isn't it? So from what you see in your work, what tends to break trust the fastest, especially when people sound confident or authoritative or in their positions of power? What is it that really can just break it in two?
The lack of a willingness to acknowledge that we don't walk the same paths. We don't share the same lived experiences. We don't live in the same cultures, in the same communities. We don't have the same family structures. We weren't raised the same. There are so many different factors that frame trust. One of the questions I love to ask in the process of sharing polls on LinkedIn and during presentations is asking people, what is trust? Is your lens from a lived experience? Is it from a story you read? Is it from a movie? Is it from a book? And in my case, that lens of what is trust and what inspired me to pursue certifications was my trust was broken several times. And that happens with many of us. There's some relationships, they're like, if we look at Lanier's beautiful plants behind us. They're hardy, they're strong, they're well cared for, they're loved. In some relationships, they don't have that cultivation, that nourishing. We're not pouring into them, for lack of a better word. And that especially happens online, where we can't always hear each other, we can't always see each other, we can't always feel each other. And sometimes we're too tired to process that. But I think the way to frame it too is by thinking of trust as what affects your trust lens.
Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, I'd be interested in other people putting this in the comments, what they think about this. But just a note to share, I can't see the comments today, share, thanks to the changes on StreamYard. So do put things on the screen if you think people would like to see them, or I should see them. I would say that my lens is through lived experience. And, I've been here a few years, so I have had a bit of experience. And I think I'm a reader, and so I probably learn a lot about trust from my reading, because books are often about how trust breaks and how it is mended. Again, there are a lot of other topics as well, but generally that's a theme that seems to come through a lot of the material that I read. I'm a great reader of novels, and it seems to me that it is something that we have to learn to listen to our own inner voice on. And sometimes I find that I'm pretty much right about my assessment about whether someone is trustworthy. Sometimes I'm wrong. And that can be an eye-opener, either whether because I didn't trust them and they turned out to be trustworthy, or the opposite, which is much harder to handle. But I do think that the lived experience and understanding from through your own particular lens, what trust is and who you might trust, is something that we should be thinking more about, particularly given that trust seems to be eroding in so many different ways. Through AI, we all know about hallucinations on AI, and we all know that social media is not exactly the most trustworthy anymore. Sometimes those two go hand in hand, and AI is the reason why we can't trust social media, because so much content on social media now is in fact created by AI. So I think that we're at a turning point with trust, Mel. At this stage, we've had a good 2 years of AI being in our lives, and it'll become more prominent, I think, this year. Anybody who spent the last couple of years going, no, I don't need AI, no, don't bother me with that, thanks very much, will find that it will come to them anyway, whether they like it or not, because it seems to be getting embedded into so many different things. But I just wonder what kind of signals we should be paying attention to, that you might know that even with my lived experience, I might not have picked up, that can tell us whether someone, let's just talk about people for a minute, whether someone is trustworthy. And, I know that trust, at least I expect that trust is on a continuum as well, in the sense that, sometimes people, if you've got a friend, for example, and you've developed a good level of trust with them, something can happen in the middle of that kind of derails it for a bit. But then because you've got that experience with that person, and the length of your tenure of your friendship, you can bring it back into line again, and it's just a blip, something happened, bad day, whatever it might have been, and you just continue on. But are there signals that we should be looking for that tell us that we should avoid somebody that really is, they're not worth our time or attention or trust?
Yes, there are probably a bunch of nonverbal cues, or what I'd like to call traffic signals. I think of trust as our ability to approach different intersections. Sometimes you're at a roundabout or you're at a thoroughfare and there's a stop sign and someone goes through it. Sometimes there's a yield sign and someone is not yielding.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like today, on a day when platforms change, our familiarity with the streets and the intersections. It's kind of like that detour where Waze tells you a road is closed, or there's a road closed in bad weather for an accident or for a parade. Um, I think the thing that's really important is, you mentioned it, from a sense of really knowing yourself. Jedi J is one of the people who's in our audience, a young man who I've had the pleasure of speaking with many times recently about trust. And we talk about how our lenses are different.
Mhm.
We're different generations. We're, as you would say, we have different lived experiences. And in some cases, in workplaces, you're working across shifts.
Mhm.
You're working in different departments, you're working in different areas. Our trust lens changes depending on whether we're with someone who has the perfect energy. I like to call them sustainable energies. They wake us
Mhm.
up, they help us keep going, they help us jump the hurdles, they help us walk the marathons. The people who are cheering you on, they're giving you sustainable energies no matter what your trust lens or your perspective is. But I think online it's challenging in the sense that people feel through this AI lens or the trust lens, they're not sure whether what they see is real, whether what they
Mhm.
are hearing is real. And that part is, we're not always present. We can watch a clip that someone shares and we're like, oh no, that didn't happen. And you can see a post where someone is maybe from their power and control lens. And I'm on a board of teen dating violence, human trafficking, domestic violence. I have family members that have been who are now guardian angels as a result of different types of violence. And I think that affects your trust lens, how you see
Mhm.
it, whether the glass is half full or half empty, whether the newsletter you're reading is just bringing you humor, whether the viewpoint is encouraging you to take a step closer. But from a trust lens, when it's broken, I've learned I lean backwards. There's something in a Zoom call that causes you to lean backwards. There's something someone at a table has said, that person who cut you off in the parking lot, for example, and they take the space, or it's a holiday rush and you hear someone's tone and it doesn't align with the energy that you want to bring to it. So, what Yvette taught me was trust is an emotion, and trust is energy in motion. And that motion, our ability to sense it and see it, and it varies. We have different personalities, different cultures, different languages we speak, different time zones. We get more sleep than someone else. Someone's vegan or gluten free. If you think of trust and broken trust as someone changing an ingredient in your favorite recipe,
Mhm.
it could be that simple, that it's that small, that someone maybe used a sugar substitute instead of sugar, or someone's gluten free. Recently met amazing Lachelle Atkins, America's Supermom, and there was a gluten free pasta from scratch, and there was a homemade pasta, and they taste very different. It's just like all the beautiful blooms in Linnaeus Johnston, in Linnaeus Garden, or the lens that I use when we're trying to cultivate trust. Plant seeds. When it's broken, you need help to replenish it, to rejuvenate it with care, with space, when there's an opportunity. But you also need privacy. You may need a mediator. May need a bunch. You may need time to elapse. And on social media, people like to respond immediately. I'm the introvert. I'll sit back. I'll hit the save button on multiple platforms to save it for later, to save the read later. I'm grateful to mom for having taught me that through the lens of learning. But I think people feel, especially on different platforms and with AI, that they need to react. We don't need to always respond.
Mhm.
We need to
You're
listen.
right. Yeah. And I read something the other day, probably from one of the people in yours and my network, who was talking about the fact that listening is such an important thing to do, and the gift that that gives somebody when you do listen to them. And you're not always thinking of your next response, and you're not just waiting for your turn to speak, but you actually do listen to what somebody has to say. And not only to what they actually say, but what is underneath what they say. Because there's an awful lot of people who don't always say what they mean, and there is intent underneath that that is not necessarily the same or reflected in their words. And I think we need to definitely keep that in mind. But to me, listening is a skill that is definitely being eroded at the moment because everything's happening so fast. You know, I can put a prompt into my AI and get a response back in nanoseconds before I really even thought through the question properly myself. My brain doesn't work that fast, Mel. And I think that sometimes the speed of which we're trying to do things can lend itself towards us not being as trustworthy and trusting as much as we might. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, because I think there are different types of listening abilities, just like there are different types of styles. I had the pleasure of watching a masterclass a while ago by, uh, I believe it's Shelley O'Donovan. I'll try and look it up and put a link in later in the chat. And Shelley talked about nonverbal cues. And if we think of that in a post, our posts are nonverbal. You're not hearing the language with which someone's speaking. You're not seeing the face or the emotions through which they showed up. What I was really appreciative of was the opportunity to work with a wonderful client who was blind. Her husband was blind. Her
Oh,
children her children had full vision. But what I loved about working with her, and especially in our trust journey, what I learned from her was our other senses need to lean in and take place. And AI doesn't have six senses. AI doesn't have the emotional capability of the lived experiences. They're not blooming. AI is not always blooming like the plants behind Lanier. Sometimes AI feels like a cactus or a weed. and, and
I've got a lot of those, Mel.
I have some bulbs that we never planted because they look like they were duds, you know. And you keep hoping. On the other hand, we gave a wonderful amaryllis to our bonus mom recently, and I had shared a picture with Lanier, and when we gave it to her, I was worried because I wasn't sure how it was doing in the box. When she opened the box, she said the plant was blooming. The plant was busting out. And she said it's since the holidays, four blooms. And then as the four blooms the withered, up came another shoot with two more blooms.
Oh
And
my
now
goodness
a week
me.
later, she sees another bloom. So I think of trust as that opportunity to hopefully plant a seed in a relationship. I call it cultivate trust. I acknowledge my mission is the hopes of igniting trust in our
Mhm,
complex and fragile AI world. But for others, it's an invitation. How can we help you plant a seed? How can we help you flourish or find a solution? AI may be really helpful, such as a reservation that we had made around the time when you were looking for venues. You and I were talking online about that. You were trying to reach a human. And
mm,
here I called a restaurant that we love celebrating life in to make an arrangement for a repast. And I get the most amazing AI voice. It made us laugh and lean in. Now, last week I called a funeral home hoping to get some information. I need you to know I never got a call back. I did
oh,
answer the first question, which got me to the answering service, but
mm,
I never got a call back. Now, if I wanted face to face to go attend services, to go send an acknowledgement, something
mm,
to let them know that a loved one who was somebody I met, knew, and loved. And I think that's the part about when AI gets it wrong. When it dehumanizes, it can feel like we're being misled.
mm,
That someone is taking something away. And we have a bunch of interesting questions in chat. And of course, today's a day that the platforms aren't integrating. But you let me know at any one point. I do have my mobile device nearby, and we do have some questions occasionally. Or if you want, let's go where you'd like to go next, and maybe we'll leave a
Why don't we
space.
have a look at the comments? I've got them on my phone too, but have you seen one there that you would like to answer? Because I can see we've got quite a lot. So thank you everybody for commenting, even though we are having a bit of a struggle with this one today. And as I said right at the very top, StreamYard have made a whole bunch of changes since our last live. And so consequently, not all things are working in the way they were intended. So is there anything there that you have, but we appreciate your comments, and please do continue to do them, because clearly we have found a workaround that we can both manage, and that is looking at the app. So anything there that you particularly want to answer at this question or reference at all, Mel?
Leslie Flowers had a question. How do we develop trust when we are so often asked to believe things that are mismatched to what we've just seen?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Trust
Right.
isn't trust. Trust is an opportunity. And if we look at it from the perspective, and I love puzzles and games. If we look at it from the perspective of developing trust is like designing a trust map. It's like designing a trust journey, but we can only pick ours. We can only pick our lane. We don't have the opportunity, and even as parents or grandparents or godparents or aunts or in family situations, we don't have a chance to select someone else's lane. And what I love is that the opportunities to develop trust were part of a masterclass series that we did. And it's not part of the master plan. It depends on the person at the other end. It depends on whether they're looking for trust opportunities or they're looking to shatter your trust lens. There's an in between, and Yvette explains it really well in terms of a trust sequence and a distrust sequence. At the ground level is no trust. In the perfect world, that's the opportunity to either cultivate trust or to cause it to move into the distrust sequence. And I think when you've seen something, are you seeing it through a full lens? Have you just woken up? Are you seeing it through a fresh set of eyes? Is there a team looking at it? Are you looking at it through the eyes of a child? Are you looking at it through your lived experience? Are you the grandparent looking at it at something your grandchild is doing? And I think that's the part about we're all seeing it differently. I think of it as a kaleidoscope, our trust lens, or as kind of a mosaic. You know, it can feel sometimes when it's mismatched that we're walking on glass or ice.
I see that in my garden, Mel. When I walk around my garden, I'm seeing it through the lens of the work I have to do. When my husband walks around the garden, he's looking at all the gorgeous things growing and how fast things are growing. He's not seeing the weeds. He's just enjoying it. When our gardener comes, she sees it in a different way. She sees it as a bigger picture thing. How are things fitting together and what's not working now because it's grown too big? And I've got a landscape gardener friend who comes and looks at it through a lens of what he could do for his clients, and how they wouldn't like my garden because it's just chaos, really. And so you're absolutely right. How we look at something really depends then how we're going to respond, doesn't it? And if we're looking at through different kinds of lens, we'll respond in different kinds of ways. You know, I've been in communications a very long time in one way, shape or form. And I've learned over the years that if you get a nasty message from somebody, or a client's upset about something, or just something bad happens, whether at work or really in your personal life, you are best to spend a bit of time just reflecting. Just let it sit. I'm a very reactive person generally, and I've had to teach myself not to respond to things that are negative so quickly. I have to let them sit. I'm quite happy about writing a response, provided I don't send it, because 9 times out of 10, it either just dissipates and was never really a problem and I was making something out of nothing. Or if I do send it, I am really going to break that trust bond that might have already existed. And so I think that whole reflection idea of yours is really important for us to keep in mind. Now, I don't know that that necessarily is the case when you might get a an obvious connection request from LinkedIn that you just know is going to be a connect and pitch, right? Or a pitch slap, as it's called. And you're best to not try just to sit with it for a while. And there are patterns that you can recognize with LinkedIn that will tell you whether or not somebody's worthwhile given the time of day, or moving along the first step in that trust sequence that you just mentioned. And one of those is I think it's different for everybody. They're looking at things through different lenses. So for me, where somebody is based geographically is a key indicator. What's their profile like? Do they post content? I'm interested in connecting with people who are active on the platform, and whether they post or engage on other people's comments. That's a good indicator to me. Who are they connected with? What's the size of their network? If you look at all of these things together, it sends out quite a number of trust signals. And I'm always trying, when I first connect to somebody, to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I've done my due diligence by that stage. I've made my decision. If I'm going to connect with you, I've looked at all those criteria and I've decided whether or not I'm going to give you the time of day. And I think that from there, it's important that you start to build the relationship. Now, some relationships won't go anywhere. People won't respond. They don't care. They don't really want to know. All they wanted was the extra follower on their profile. Fair enough. But there are other people who are on LinkedIn because they do want to build relationships. They understand the power of LinkedIn and the opportunities that it brings, like the opportunity for me in New Zealand to be talking live on LinkedIn with you in New York. That's an opportunity that would never have happened without LinkedIn. We would never have met without LinkedIn. And people, I think, see LinkedIn often as just somewhere to put their CV online. Now, you and I both know that that is not the case. You've been on LinkedIn a lot longer than me, and you've seen a lot more change. And we've seen a lot of change in the last year. But the thing that it still comes down to is relationships. And at the base of relationships is trust. And if we don't trust somebody, then it is very difficult to move things forward. Now, a person that I trust very much in my network is somebody that you know very well, Roy Kowalski. Now, Roy's in Sydney. Now, you won't have met him personally, but I have. And when he and I met in person, after many LinkedIn lives together along with you, and lots of collaborative calls about what's going on LinkedIn and what's new, etc. He was exactly the same in person as he was online. And that authenticity, I think, shines through with people like Roy. People like you are the people in my network who I do trust. And so I think trust and authenticity go hand in hand. Is that something that you would agree with?
As you would say, the daughter of a scholar, occasionally a little bit of a devil's advocate. So, as opposed to the lens of authenticity, my lens is looking for what's genuine, what feels true from a human design perspective. As my coach reminded me yesterday, what feels authentic in my gut. And it's interesting because you have a choice. You have the word here in your beautiful graphic, insights. And when our trust is broken, our when our trust is broken beyond repair, when someone has damaged the trust lens, the way we examine insights, and there are a bunch of questions about what happens when trust is broken. when you're a victim of trauma, when that lens has been affected, and is in many cases, I'll use amazing Lachelle Atkins, America's Supermom, as an example. I met her online in a very large community on another platform. When I met her in person, she's the type in person to remind you of a line of a song that one of my cousins loves, how great you are. When someone makes you feel magical, good example. And Kimberly sharing Dr. Henry Cloud's work in there. As you're sharing books, I'd love to encourage you also to look at Yvette Bethel's book, Interconnectivity, Flow, and Balance. And those are keys to our insights. Does the energy match? Is the flow the way you want it to? Do you feel a connection to someone? Or do you want to reach for insect repellent? Do you want to change your seat? And on LinkedIn, it's the same thing, because someone sent me a connection request recently and he didn't realize it because I don't think he totally read my profile, and that's fine. I was a finance major and an accounting minor, and he was in finance, and I was the trust pessimist is reading the connection request. What I loved was when I sent a reply through my trust lens, out of curiosity, are you looking for new clients or are you looking to create new relationships? What I loved was his answer inspired me to read his profile thoroughly, because I don't have Lanier's lens of I'm the kid who used to be, as Jay Trivedi put in the chat, I used to be on the bus past Times Square. I'd get my news on that little ticker tape that went around the building, because that was what, before you would sleep on the bus. So I'd wake up, that was my first news. You'd get it from like a little video. These days you get it and you want to pause and take a step back. And I think sometimes from the insights perspective, trust is internal, trust is external. And when our trust lens is cloudy, it's broken, it's rusty, it's fogged. You feel like it's shattered because someone betrayed your trust. What I love is getting certified in trust. I know that as a trust pessimist, I am trust willing, and that's the approach that I choose to have on this platform. When we're in person, and somebody at a live event who was never very kind to me. The last time we saw each other was during the pandemic. I had a mask on. And this person, I'm at a check-in desk helping a client. And this person went out of their way to come move my hair during the pandemic and kiss me on the cheek. Their kiss wasn't welcome. Think of LinkedIn as an opportunity to shake a hand. Think of it as, and I appreciate Elijah Drown reminds me of it. Elijah said, Mel, you used to say smiles across the miles, and I thought it was corny. And I realized you meant it. Bring someone a smile. Nicole's in the audience, and I'm looking forward to our chat tomorrow. You know, we've been seeing each other in different circles. It'll be a chance to kind of have tea, have a virtual chai, have a virtual cup of coffee. And I think that is the opportunity, if you choose to, whether it's through connection requests, whether it's through sending a response, whether deciding maybe their timing's not right, then you're doing what Lanier's doing. You're checking every corner of their profile. But I learned if the I isn't dotted and the T isn't crossed, as they're just starting to teach children in some school districts how to write in cursive, because they grow up to be young adults and they can't write their name on a check or a passport application. It's our lens. How do we look at things, and how do we help each other from the perspective when it's broken, when we're not feeling trust willing? I can say I'm a trust pessimist in my core because of the broken trust, but I'm trust willing when I show up. And I choose carefully sacred spaces with amazing people, because that's what my trust lens requires to maintain the energy. Otherwise, the introvert, we don't come out and play. We become the lurkers. As one of my coaches who I'll see tomorrow, I was his lurker and finally saw him after 5 years at a live event. And I won a session with him, and he says, if you ever see me at an event again and you don't come say hi, please, please. And that's what AI can get wrong. It can miss that I see you, I hear you, I feel you opportunity. If you're using it for your posts and you're sending the same connection request template that others are, if you're mentioning, I've heard this week and today, I heard about a trust recession during a webinar. Trust recession means we're withdrawing from each other. The person said it as if, as Lanier just expressed it, through a global lens, that it seems like it's happened in the last 2 years. As a girl from the Bronx, it's been happening longer. So depending on the environment we're in, the workplaces, the people who surround us, who are helping us define and sharpen that trust lens. Kimberly Lechnick, I love speaking with her in her community because she's got wonderful sons and she shares through a wide lens. She's seeing the world through her children's lens. And Leanna's saying, amen, very wise. Not so wise, Leanna. It's just an opportunity if you choose to extend it, to accept it, to receive it, and to acknowledge it. And if it's not that day, maybe you let the connection request sit. Maybe you let the message sit. Maybe you let the comments sit as I save them, because sometimes my eyes aren't quite open to the thought. I need to read it. Read the 5,000 page character letter, newsletter. One of Lanier's amazing community members, Katja, shared a newsletter while I was preparing for something filled with vital information. I read it cover to cover, bookmarked it. And then we reached out and had a conversation. That is trust willing. And that is the lens when we're cultivating trust that you can lean into. If you're not feeling it, take a nap. As kids would say, put on some music, dance it out, call someone you love.
Go into your garden.
Oh yes, I'm coming to visit Lanier's garden. I am coming. Believe me, I'm going to find that transatlantic cruise. We will get there.
Make sure you come in the summer, although the weather this summer has been appalling. Let's not go into that. Have we answered, do you think, Mel, John Werner's question about rebuilding or reestablishing trust once it's been broken? She has just popped that into our private chat because, of course, as you know, we can't see the comments except on our phones. So do you think we have covered that sufficiently, or have you got some more comments you'd like to make about that? Because I think that's a really important thing to think about, because we do find that we can have our trust broken, but that's from our perspective. The other person might not know that the trust has been broken. I'm guessing they might not know they've done something that has really, caused a problem. Do you think?
Trust pessimist, Mel, experience, life experience. Rebuilding takes more than two people. Reestablishing takes a village. An example, somebody I adore who I met, and we were working together on my first hybrid event. I adored this person. We spent a lot of time together. We met in person. We took the social media relationship to a family dinner. They joined us for a family dinner, and I was so excited to meet them in person. Years later, without realizing it, as I was processing change through my lens, real time, and as they were processing virtually through their interest in generating revenue, we were two trains moving on opposite tracks in different directions that had originally aligned at an intersection. And that part about alignment or realignment, John, that's the invitation. Can a relationship realign? Does it have the support of an HR department, a lawyer, a mediator, a family member, a friend? Because depending on whether the relationship is a workplace relationship. I've worked in toxic cultures, as many of us have. We speak about that a lot during disruptive business leadership. But what stage was the relationship at is one of the hardest things. This relationship was really, really important to me. And this relationship had really strengthened, I thought, after 6 years. We had shared experiences. We were really good friends as well as amazing collaborators. And one day they reached out while I was hosting an event, and they were on my mobile device. Just like today, I was trying to look at my phone. And as Cher would say in the background, when you're running lights, camera, action, and you have a panel, you got some stuff to do.
You
And I'm
do.
trying to clear the messages, and they felt like I wasn't listening.
Oh dear.
And in the process, I shared something that they didn't know. And they felt my response was inappropriate.
Mm.
They didn't realize I had just lost a parent. And I was acknowledging a complex season of gratitude, grief, and growth. And John, that is the part that's hard. We never know what season someone's in. And that part of not knowing, it takes a village to help support and and recultivate, to, just like Linnaeus' beautiful plants, to add the nutrients into the soil and to see if the person at any point is trustworthy. In this relationship, it's really important to me. I wish them Happy New Year. I didn't expect to receive a response, and I'm not expecting a response. That relationship might have been beyond repair. And I don't think either of us did anything intentionally to hurt each other. And I don't think the opportunity will present itself to speak with the person. I just know that in my heart. And I think that's the part. In a workplace, we, as conscious leaders, as vibrant leaders, we're trying not to bring our emotions to the table. We're trying to keep things nice and tidy. We're used to a very different back end on StreamYard. We're used to a different backyard on LinkedIn. And here we are.
Here we are. Fascinating. I think that I'm probably a trust optimist. I tend to take people on face value, and if all the signs are good, then I will give people the benefit of the doubt and let them prove me wrong. And I think that is not necessary. I think there are different ways to do it, but that's just how I do it as a person. If I meet somebody socially, for example, or in a business networking setting or online, then I'm willing to listen to hear what they have to say and to respond and hopefully in a way that they feel is appropriate to the situation and what their intent might be. I don't respond well to people who say, hi, Lanier, my name is Joe Smith. Would you like to buy my whatever? I don't trust people who have that lens at all. If I meet this person and they say, tell me a little bit about you, or I hear you've got a great garden, or I've seen you on LinkedIn, tell me about that. How did that come about? Whatever. If somebody reaches out and asks a question, which is something our friend Roy Kowalski is always suggesting, and asks a question that is genuine, authentic, and they listen to the answer, then to me that's a really positive trust signal. Now, I know that in work environments, it's not always easy. And you mentioned that we've both in the past worked in toxic workplaces, and that is very true from my side. And it's one of the reasons why I don't work for an employed position anymore. And I've worked for myself for so many years. But believe me, there have been some times I wanted to fire me, Mel. I've really got on my nerves. Can you? And I'm sure Cher was nodding when she hears that, because she'll go, oh, yes, she gets on my nerves too. But I do think that in a workplace, it's all very different, and it's a lot more difficult because there's always that 10% that you don't know about what is going on in the business relationship, in the business, full stop. And we've got different departments. Often bigger organizations are very siloed. And that same level of trust that we're talking about isn't always possible, because those relationships are much more tenuous. And we're talking about relationships where there is that generally the one-to-one contact, either online or in real life. But I think that in a business setting, it can be a lot more difficult to build those trust relationships because people will behave differently in one setting than they will in another. So if you're in a meeting, you would expect there to be a high level of trust because what's going on is at a professional level. If you're standing around the water cooler, I'm not quite sure whether this is still an apt metaphor anymore, given that I don't work in offices, but if people are standing around a water cooler and something is said by one person about another that is not terribly complimentary, that isn't trustworthy behaviour, and it might be at odds with what's happened in the meeting or in the boardroom. And I think that there can be those different sorts of occasions where trust can be eroded in different kinds of ways, and we may not be aware of it either. I think that, and that's what I mean about that 10% that you don't know that somebody is saying something about. So have you got any advice for people who, when they're in an organization, or really on LinkedIn for that matter, who are looking to build their trust relationships or their trust profile or their trust sequence, because you shared a few different terms on this one today. Have you got any ideas of what people could stop doing that might erode trust? And one thing that they could do more of deliberately to build trust. Any ideas around that?
From the perspective of eroding trust, if you're in an industry setting with others, an industry setting or a workplace setting that utilizes both AI and social media, whether it's for communication, whether it's for research or development, I think one of the things that can erode trust almost immediately is our lack of willingness to give someone the benefit of the doubt. One of the examples recently was a video that a family member is sharing. They're circulating to try and increase some support in a really complex season of gratitude, grief, and growth. And the platform says that this is a deep fake. This is somebody I know and love. And in every environment, when someone else looks, they may not be willing to give someone the benefit of the doubt. They may be counting the time clock or the productivity or the outputs without realizing that in some cases, from a trust lens, the person who you're sharing instructions with is translating them into another language.
Oh, cool.
The person has some special abilities. I like to consider neurodiverse abilities. They're opportunities, just as with my amazing blind client. She taught me so much more about how to embrace our senses. Trust is erosion when we don't trust there's a human on the other side. And I believe that is one of the biggest things. Is this real, or is it, years ago they used to say, is this live or is this Memorex? I'm dating myself. But, is this real? Did I really hear what you said? And I had an employer who used to frame questions like that. And I had another employer who's like, you're presenting something that I haven't heard about. Let's create a time and a space to talk about it. If it's in a meeting and the meeting has a schedule, if it's not an emergency, is this a priority? Those lack of respect from an awareness perspective, from a respect perspective, and anything that can damage a culture can damage a person, and you'll never know it. You'll just lose the client, the relationship, and you'll lose the opportunity to have a future discussion. And I think also another thing that erodes it is the insistence to have a conversation on your terms, not on mutually agreeable terms, and not at a mutually convenient time. The other part of your question, Lanier, I think the opportunity exists to have what I love calling and what Yvette has helped us learn are circles of trust. You sit
Mhm.
down in a small and intimate space, almost not retreat style, but summit style, as if you're in a mini mastermind, and you really create a space over a couple of hours or a half day or longer to really listen to your team members. You also give them an opportunity to really spend time with themselves, because sometimes in some certain cultures you're working with someone you haven't seen the person in 6 months, and you're at a conference. You haven't seen them in a year. You know each other virtually, and you're finally meeting in person. Treasure the opportunity. But people were asking about trust willingness. Listen to what Lanier said before, because Lanier, as a trust optimist, she nailed it. How she shows up as if you're about to be a beautiful bloom in her garden, as opposed to a weed or a cactus.
Which we already have established I have plenty of. The weeds, not so much the cactus in my environment. All right, Mel, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and we've had some really great comments from people in the audience, and I really so appreciate people taking the time to share them, even if we've not been able to get them on the screen today. But thank you too for people who have shared ideas of different things that we might look at, people we might go and investigate on the back of this, because I think that it's important that we share as much information as we possibly can about these topics and talk about them as openly as possible as well, because I tend to think that trust is one of those terms we just throw out there, but we don't really can give it as much consideration as we should. So Mel, I want to just finally ask you whether there's anything else you would like to say about trust just before we wrap up today.
Thanks to Lanier and my amazing team member, Carla Sellers, who is about to sponsor an upcoming webinar series. We're launching a series about cultivate trust in our fragile AI world. It was suggested by others who knew that I had a fear of it, because AI was in my distrust sequence. I had a deep, intense distrust of it. Now I understand through a lens of how to use it maybe to help increase the quality of conversations we're able to have across cultures, communities, genders, generations, and identities and time zones.
Yay! We really appreciate you spending the time with us today, Mel. So thank you. And given the situation that we've been seeing in New York, I appreciate the fact you've managed to dig yourself out of that snow and spend some time with us.
We appreciate the opportunity, and I'm very grateful to my retired first responder as we approach the 25th anniversary of Never Forget. Keep making time for those that matter. Keep reaching out. And someone put a comment about selling on LinkedIn. Trust-based sales are the way to go.
I think that's fabulous. We will leave it there. Mel, thank you so very much for joining us today. And if anyone who has been watching is not connected to Mel, then please do so. Make sure that she is in your network, because she's an amazing person and we just love her to bits. Now, wanted just to give you a quick recap, I guess, of what we've been discussing today, because I think it's really important to, before we just finish off, just to think over some of the useful ideas and information that we have been sharing and talking about, so that it does sink in and we don't just run on to the next thing and forget all about what we have talked about today. So I think it's fair to say that trust is not a feeling, it's not a personal brand claim, and it's not something that you can declare once and assume it's in place permanently. Trust is built or eroded, as we've heard, through patterns of behavior. And we've talked about how trust shows up in everyday life, how it shapes what we believe, and how quickly we make judgments about what deserves our attention or action. And we've also explored how inside organizations trust runs in two directions. The trust that people place in leaders and the trust that leaders extend to others. And that second part, I think, is what really matters, because when leaders trust their teams, people step up. When they don't, control increases, pace slows, and confidence quietly drains away. Trust doesn't just affect relationships, it affects performance. And in a world where AI can generate confident, polished content at speed, trust has become even more visible. Not because the tools are bad, but because judgment now stands out more clearly. What we choose to share, automate, delegate, or attach our names to send signals, whether we intend to or not. So LinkedIn is simply one place where this plays out, of course, in public, and people are constantly deciding who to follow, who to listen to, who shows to show up at, who to recommend, and who to work with based on these same trust signals. So consistency, clarity, accountability, and how others are treated along the way. So if there's one thread running through today's event and conversation, it is this. Trust isn't about sounding confident. It's about being careful with influence. And it's built in small, observable moments over time. That's what makes it powerful, and that's why it matters so much right now. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to see Mel and I together again, you can do so this Friday in the US, Saturday in New Zealand, Australia, for the Disruptive Business Leaders live stream. And we'll make sure that there's a link in the comments to that. We'll be talking about disruptive leadership through the lens of the various co-hosts, including Mel and I, and Roy Kowalski and Martin Stark then. We'll also be back with another Linkability Insights live stream for you in a matter of just weeks, and we look forward to seeing you back with us for that. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Meryl Cass and to Cher Ferguson for keeping things moving in the background. Thank you to our audience for not minding too much. We couldn't get your comments on the screen today. Thanks very much. Kia ora from New Zealand, and bye for now.